Welcome, everybody. Can you all hear me? Thank you so much for being here. For those who are here in person and over 300 folks who are joining us virtually, welcome, welcome, welcome to our Juneteenth celebration, sponsored by the Nevada Equal Rights Commission and the ABA. We have a special treat for you today. My name is Jenkins. I will be giving just the welcoming remarks, and then we're going to get to the best part of this program, which is my moderated discussion with acclaimed law professor Tanya Hernández. I can't wait. You all are in for a big treat with that. But I just want to say a couple of remarks. Juneteenth is a very special celebration, and we are really, really happy here in Nevada because the governor just signed into legislation, Assembly Bill 140, which now makes Juneteenth a state holiday here in Nevada. So we are so happy about that. Folks online, people are clapping here, silent claps and snaps. And so we are so happy to celebrate that this Monday we will be commemorating the emancipation of the formerly enslaved, the last to be notified. We'll talk more about that and why Juneteenth is so important. In fact, today's topic is reflections on freedom, racial and economic justice for African descendants. So thank you all so much for being here. I also want to acknowledge the Whitney Library and the Concert Hall and all their staff, from Nyla to Marcy, Felipe. Thank you all so very much for giving us this space so we can celebrate liberation, which is exactly what the Equal Rights Commission does. We allow for safe spaces to equally enjoy and celebrate. So the commission was founded in 1961, and so our responsibility at the Equal Rights Commission is to ensure that we have outreach and training and look into complaints of discrimination. So I am just so happy and honored. I'm also happy and honored to say that we have our dear friends and highly decorated and noted state legislators and appointed and electeds here, online and virtually. Claire, I know you're here, Assemblywoman Claire Thomas, who sponsored AB 140. I know she's listening on virtually. Congratulations on this bill. We are so grateful that you put forth this legislation during this last session. I'm also very happy that our welcome and remarks will be from none other than State Attorney General Aaron Ford and U.S. Attorney Jason Frierson. Great friends of mine, great Nevadans, and just amazing, stellar people. So, having said that, we're going to get started with a very special presentation from our friends from Broadway in the Hood. They will be doing Stand Up from Harriet and Brand New Day from The Wiz. Take it away, Broadway in the Hood.
I've been walking, my face turned to the sun. Weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for my people. While the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night, that's when I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on, I can feel it in my bones. Early in the morning, before the sun begins to shine, we're gonna start moving towards that separating line. I'm waiting through state of mind. And I don't mind if I lose any blood on the way to salvation, but I'll fight with the strength that I got until I die. So I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. And I know what's around the bend might be hard to face, 'cause I'm alone, and I just might fail, but Lord knows I'll try. Sure stars fill up the sky. Stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Do you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Do you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Do you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you.
We as African Americans have come so far, and there is a reason for us to celebrate. Thank you to the legislation for all you have done for us now to celebrate Juneteenth and for us to have a brand new day. Roll that song. Woo, come on.
Everybody look around, 'cause there's a reason to rejoice, you see.
Everybody come out and commence to singing joyfully.
Everybody look up and feel the hope that we've been waiting on.
Everybody's glad, 'cause the sun and fear and dread is gone. You see, we've got our hearts singing so joyfully.
Just look about, you owe it to yourself to check it out.
Can't you feel a brand new day?
Can't you feel a brand new day? Can't you feel a brand new day? Can't you feel a brand new day? Everybody be glad.
Be glad.
The sun is shining just for
Just feel
us.
Everybody wake up!
Wake up.
In the morning it's a happiness.
Hello world, it's like a different way of living now.
We always knew that we'd be free somehow.
It's such a change for us to live so independently.
Freedom, you see, we've got our hearts singing so joyfully.
Just look about, you owe it to yourself to check it out. Can't you feel a brand new day? 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 All right. new day, brand 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 new day. All right, it's Juneteenth, y'all.
Hey!
Everybody be glad.
Be glad.
The sun is shining just for
Just
us.
feel it.
Everybody wake up!
Wake up!
It's the morning, get to happiness.
Hello, world. It's like a different way of living now.
We always knew that we'd be free somehow. In harmony, we show the world that we have liberty.
It's such a change for us to live so independently.
Freedom you see, it's got our hearts singing so joyfully.
Just look about, you owe it to yourself to check it out.
Can't you feel a brand new day?
Can't you feel a brand new day? Can't you feel a brand new day? Can't you feel a brand new day?
Thank you. Check 1, 2. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, some of our young people from Broadway in the Hood. Thank you so much for joining us. We actually have a summer camp right now that's going on as we speak with 100 young people from all across the community that's free and open to them. Every summer we do a free summer camp. So we are headed back to camp. Really quickly, I started Broadway in the Hood 11 years ago as a local nonprofit organization to train and educate young people in theater and the arts. And we have truly been blessed. As of last week, Broadway in the Hood has officially announced that we are building the Legacy Theater of Excellence. It is the first African-American owned and operated education, theater, and training facility right in Las Vegas. We are also truly blessed and honored to announce that AB 525, Assembly Bill 525, was passed, and which allows Broadway in the Hood and the Legacy Theater to receive $1 million from the state of Nevada. We are just waiting for the governor to sign. So y'all send him an email or a letter out there and tell him, go on, sign. This is history. And we need for everybody to stand with us, because we honored those people who came through the back doors, the Sammy Davis Jr.'s, the Gladys Knights, and those people who helped those people. We are about training and educating. These young people, are the future, and we have to support them. To God be the glory. Enjoy the rest of the Juneteenth performance. To all of our assembly members, to the Bar Association, donate. Broadway in the Hood is fully funded by donations. Please, please, please. TheLegacyTheater.com, TheLegacyTheaterLasVegas.com, or BroadwayInTheHood.org. To God be the glory. Thank you.
Thank you, Tori. Back to camp he goes. You should have seen him back here, you guys. He was doing all the moves. He knew it. He is amazing. Tori Russell, you are a gem to the city and the state, and we appreciate you and the dancers. Now we have a very solemn and sacred moment. We're going to have local Las Vegas celebrity artists sing the Black National Anthem. Lisi, please join us at the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Lisi.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the faith that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing. I'm seeing all the hearts light up online for not only our youth, Broadway in the Hood, but also for you, Lisi. Thank you so much. Now we're going to get to the fun part, which I think it's been fun so far, but we're going to get through this run of show, and I want to welcome a dear friend, someone who's committed to service, someone who exemplifies not only through words and actions, but shows up and is here for Nevadans and is here for Black people. That is our Attorney General, Aaron Ford.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's try that again. Good afternoon, everyone. It is great to be here. My name is Aaron Ford, and I am your Attorney General. Honored and delighted to be here. Let's give it up for the beautiful rendition of the Negro National Anthem. Give it up. Let's also give it up for Broadway in the Hood. Give it up for them as well. So, happy Freedom Day, everybody. Happy Freedom Day. As I said, my name is Aaron Ford. I am your Attorney General, and I'd like to welcome everyone from the Nevada Equal Rights Commission and the American Bar Association to this Juneteenth program right here in Las Vegas, and those of you online as well. This year we're celebrating a historic Juneteenth in Nevada, with the day becoming an official state holiday. We are part of more than half of states in the country to recognize Juneteenth as an official public holiday this year, and that's something that is to be commended. Some folks say it'll just be another day off from work, but truly this day is deeply meaningful, with it being not only a day of observance, but also one that acknowledges the emancipation of enslaved Black people in the United States. Most of us know the history behind Juneteenth. Union troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, mid-June of 1865, 2 years after Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation, to inform the more than 250,000 enslaved Black people in Texas that they were officially free. I can only imagine the reaction of my third great-grandparents, John and Ann O'Neill, as well as Harrison and Clarissa Brooks, who lived in Fordyce, Texas, which is not too far from Galveston, when they heard the news around this same time. I can only imagine the jubilation of another of my third great-grandfathers from Indiana, John Harper, who served as part of the 28th Regiment of the U.S. Colored Troops during the Civil War, and appears to have been stationed in Corpus Christi, Texas, also not too far from Galveston, around the time that this news was delivered. You see, Juneteenth for me is not just a day off of work. It's not just a holiday. It's personal. It's familial. Because here I stand 158 years later as your first Black Attorney General in the state of Nevada, a state that has the nickname of Battleborn for joining the Union during the Civil War. Also a state that has been unfortunately colloquially labeled the, quote, Mississippi of the West, for the segregation and Jim Crow prohibitions toward Black people. It's a position that I don't take lightly, and one that I hope inspires more of us to continue to push forward as more firsts, and you'll hear from another first in just a second. But more than that, I want my role as Nevada's first Black Attorney General in Nevada to give people confidence that equal justice can be had here and that equal rights will be upheld here. It's been an important initiative of mine to diversify the Attorney General's office because representation is a seed of hope. We expand public trust when individuals see someone they can identify with doing the type of work that justice requires. For example, as a member of the Board of Examiners for this state, I've recommended more than $350,000 in compensation for innocent people in this state who were wrongfully incarcerated. And that was just for one person. It's been millions of dollars for folks who've been wrongly incarcerated. When Nevada restored the right to vote for the formerly incarcerated folks back in 2019, thanks to another individual you're going to hear from soon, my office started an initiative to inform those individuals of their rights and to guide them through the process of restoring those rights. My office has enforced the eviction moratorium during COVID, during the pandemic state of emergency, helping families to stay afloat. And we also supported the allocation of $4 million from a settlement we received from T-Mobile that secured the state and goes towards enhancing entrepreneurial opportunities for women, for minorities, and for women and minority-owned businesses in our state. I can go on, but we don't have enough time for that. However, it is important to note that of all the things that I've talked about, wrongful incarceration, voting rights, housing rights, and even support for small businesses, I just talked about those have a greater impact on Black and brown families. Doing that work as Nevada Attorney General is what makes people believe in the system of justice and believe that it can do the work that it's supposed to do. But let me be clear, this job isn't easy. It's not easy being the Attorney General, certainly being the first African-American Attorney General. I have some coworkers here with me who I think can attest to that fact. We operate under the mantra that our job is justice and that we focus on our 5 C's in our office: constitutional rights, criminal justice and reform, consumer protection, client service and community engagement. And as well-meaning as we are, oftentimes we are misconstrued and we are attacked. And it's not easy doing this job. And so you have to find a motivation to keep going. And frankly, I found my motivation. And I'm just going to share with you, talk to you about my 3rd great-grandparents. Let me tell you about my 4th great-grandparent, a guy named William Berry. This is my motivation. This is why I can withstand, I get goosebumps coming up. This is why we can withstand some of the nonsense that we have to engage in. William Berry was born into slavery, a Black man in Arkansas, Fordyce, Arkansas. I said Fordyce, Texas, Fordyce, Arkansas. He was married with children, and one day in the mid-1800s, they put him on the auction block to sell him. As they were prone to do, they tried to separate him from his wife and his children. William Berry stood on that auction block, however, and he said, nope. This is the oral history of my family. He said, no, you won't sell me. I will not be separated from my wife and my children. I'm a man. You will not sell me. I will not be separated. So they didn't sell him. They killed him right there on the auction block. And then they sold 3 of his sons to a slaver in Texas. That's how I hail from Texas, and that's how my 3rd great-grandfather got to experience word of the Emancipation Proclamation in Texas. And I stand here 4 generations after William Berry with his same blood flowing through my blood, with his same esteem flowing through my blood, and working as hard as I can, standing up not only for my own dignity, but yours as well. And that's what Juneteenth can do for us, recognizing history, especially during a time period when folks are trying to erase history. They don't want you to know this history. They want to burn the book that mentions Emancipation Proclamation. How do I know that? I'm from Texas, and they've been trying to do that for a long time. So listen, thank you so much for putting this on, Kara, to you and to your team. You deserve credit for this, and thank you for everybody for participating in this. It's a very important occasion for all of us, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, General Ford. That's amazing. I got goosebumps, too. And here you are, the ancestors of your great-greats, standing as the first African-American Attorney General for Nevada. Let's give it up one more time. There's redemption, and that's also a part of our celebration, the redemptive quality of justice. And so next, it is my great honor to introduce our first African-American U.S. Attorney, Jason Frierson.
Good afternoon, everyone. A couple of the problems with following Attorney General Aaron Ford is, number one, you have to adjust the mic. And number two, you have to adjust your script because he said everything that you were going to say. I'm going to just adapt, and that's what I do. I'm incredibly honored to be here. Thank you, Karen. Thank you all for being here. Those of you online, thank you. I'm looking in the audience. I'm seeing people who knew me when I had all of my hair and none of it was gray. That reflects a history of, I think, our partnership and the character of the people that we surround ourselves with. It's good to see you all. Of course, Juneteenth represents an opportunity to look back, look at our history, appreciate the struggles that we as African Americans have gone through and the delay in embracing our equality. But it's not just looking back in history. It's also an opportunity to look forward, to recognize the contributions that African Americans have had in this nation and to embrace it. In looking out at the crowd, I'm reminded of a conversation that I had just this week. Again, I'm pivoting now. Just this week with some young future lawyers, and we had this conversation about diversity and about race, and we ended up talking about how some folks who are well-intended talk about being colorblind. And what I urged everyone in that conversation is, I know it's well-intended, but don't be colorblind. I look out in this crowd, and when I see a white man in this crowd, I see somebody who probably had to struggle and balance embracing their own heritage, but acknowledging the privilege that came along with them being white men. But they're here. We see you, and I think it's important that we see you. When I think about that conversation, I think about the struggles that women have in being treated equal. Now, I was formerly in the legislature, and I was honored to be the speaker of the Nevada State Assembly, and also part of a legislature that was the first majority female legislature in the history of this country. You don't do something like that and not learn from it. So when I look at women, I look at folks that had to overcome things that I could never understand. I respect that. I look at my wife, who is wonderful, and I watch the things that she has to do every day. I watch her have to I get ready in 5 minutes, and it's a whole exercise with her. But she has to be taken seriously, and these are efforts that she puts forth that I don't have to worry about every day to be taken seriously and to be treated equally. But I bring that up to say, if I said that I was blind to their gender, I'm robbing them of the experiences that they had to be treated equal, to compete, to be on the same playing field. So don't be blind to that. So with respect to African Americans, when they say, I'd like to be colorblind, it's like, no, don't be colorblind. See that, you know, I am the first African-American U.S. attorney in the history of the District of Nevada. I was also the first African-American speaker in the history of the state of Nevada. Aaron Ford and I served together for the first time, African-American Senate Majority Leader and Speaker at the same time. It's exhausting being first, but it's encouraging that we are opening the door so that we're not the last. So when somebody tells me that they're colorblind, I say, you're robbing me of my history. You're robbing me of what I had to go through. You know, I wasn't born in this suit. I tell people all the time, my dad worked at the dog pound. I had to work to get here, and I want people to know that I had things that I had to overcome that you might not have had to overcome. And to not see the strength of diversity, to not see the richness, the value of diversity is robbing us of that experience to get here, and it's robbing you of understanding it. And so I look at Juneteenth, and I look at this as an opportunity not only to reflect back, but to remember moving forward that everything in our community we all built together. And we have to remember that we are a community that all has value, have all contributed, and continue to contribute moving forward. But it's just a reminder looking forward also that it's not just Juneteenth. It's not just Black History Month. It's a reminder today, let's remember every day to respect and value and learn about each other and each other's contributions to our community and to our country. I am incredibly honored. I never thought that little 14-year-old boy handcuffed on the side of the curb in Compton, California would be the face of delivering justice in Nevada. But I'm sure that Aaron Ford never thought that that kid that was receiving public service was delivering service. And that's what he's doing now. So I am honored to be here. I'm honored that you, Kara, have organized this and that you all are here to enjoy, to listen, and to learn and move forward together. But let this be a reminder to appreciate and value everybody's contributions every day moving forward. Thank you all, and I look forward to the program.
Thank you. Well, it's just going to keep getting better, folks. It's just going to keep getting better. So right now, we're going to take it to online realm. Thank you for all your hearts and likes. Keep popping those hearts and likes, guys. We really appreciate your support. But now we're going to have special remarks from Juan Thomas, chair of the ABA section of the Civil Rights and Social Justice of Council, or he is the Civil Rights and Social Justice of Council chair of the ABA. So take it away online, and let's hear from Juan. Thanks, everybody.
Hello, my name is Juan Thomas, and I'm the chair of the ABA Civil Rights and Social Justice section. And on behalf of our section, I want to welcome you to our first annual Juneteenth celebration, Reflections on Freedom, Racial, and Economic Justice for African Descendants. I love the title of this program. Considered America's second Independence Day, Juneteenth is an important inflection point in American history, for it was on June 19, 1865, that an order proclaiming freedom for the African Americans who were enslaved in the state of Texas became known. 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued on January 1st, 1863. I love the title of the program because it's a reflection on the history of the African American experience in this country. African American history is American history, and our story must be told in schools, in community forums, in religious institutions, and yes, especially in the academy and in professional settings. But I also love the title of this program because it underscores the importance of economic justice. Economic justice is the theme for this year for our section. I asked our section to adopt this theme because I believe that a civil rights agenda without an economic agenda is like trying to clap with one hand. And so I want to celebrate the importance of connecting civil rights and economic justice because I believe economic justice is a critical component to civil rights and social justice. I am forever grateful for the leadership of our section's African American Affairs Committee, led by Professor Wendy Green and New Mexico State Representative Pamela Herndon, for organizing and spearheading this wonderful program. I also want to thank our section staff, Paula Shapiro and Allie Kilsegard, who have worked diligently to make this day a reality. I wish I could be with you today to hear the amazing professor and thought leader, Professor Tanya Hernández. We were so honored earlier this year to have her as a guest on our section's weekly Chair Chat podcast. I know she will engage you in a thought-provoking and enlightening conversation. Finally, as we celebrate Juneteenth, please remember the purpose of the celebration. As one historian has put it, we come to celebrate Juneteenth to educate, to celebrate, and to agitate. And I want to add, when we agitate, I hope we can all get into some good trouble. Have a wonderful program. I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Now it is my ultimate pleasure to introduce someone who is very special to me. This young lady is a trailblazer in her own right, advancing the freedom for women of color, Black women, to express their hair naturally and as it grows out of their head. And she was someone who I met in college. She inspired me to go to law school, especially when I was thinking I didn't want to stay. She was at Tulane and I was at Loyola. I get very sentimental when it comes to Professor Wendy Green. She is just amazing, so let me just introduce her to you all. So Professor Wendy Green of Drexel University Thomas R. Klein School of Law is an internationally recognized U.S. anti-discrimination law and race scholar whose work explores how constructions of identity inform and constrain the scope of civil rights laws. Professor Green is a legal expert and an advisor for federal, state, and municipal level Crown Acts, creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. Similar civil rights legislation, including our own SB 327, which was passed last session, which now Nevada recognizes our own version of Crown here in the state, thanks to the support of Professor Green and her expertise, as well as the efforts of Senator Dina Neal and Dallas Harris. Thank you so much, ladies. Along with her being a groundbreaking civil rights expert, she is also the one who basically thought of this idea to bring to Nevada our treasure, which is Professor Tanya Hernández. So, Wendy, I'm going to let you take it over now. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, Professor Wendy Green.
Well, I guess this is like just Mr. Fryer said, I'm going to have to do some adjustments here too after my dear friend. And thank you so much for that really lovely introduction, which I told her not to do, but here we are. She doesn't listen to her big sister. That's okay, but I just want to say good afternoon and happy Juneteenth. It's so good to see your faces in this room. We are so excited about the fact that this has come to fruition in a relatively short period of time, but it's been so much fun being able to organize this program, and for me to be back, I think, in like one of my second or third or fourth homes for so many different reasons. I have a great aunt who is here, who retired here some years ago, along with my great uncle, and so it's really great to be back here personally, but also professionally, as Kiara just mentioned. So again, I am just so proud to help sponsor today's commemoration of Juneteenth in partnership with the Nevada Equal Rights Commission, and I'm especially honored to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Tanya Hernández. Professor Hernández is the Archibald R. Murray Professor of Law at Fordham University School of Law. At Fordham, she also serves as the Associate Director and Head of Global and Comparative Law Programs and Initiatives, while co-leading its Center on Race, Law, and Justice. Prior to joining the Fordham Law faculty, Professor Hernández was a faculty member at St. John's, Rutgers Newark, and George Washington University Law Schools. An international thought leader and treasure, Professor Hernández has received numerous awards and accolades celebrating her contributions to the legal and broader communities. Notably, in 2011, Professor Hernández was named a Fellow of the American Bar Foundation. In 2009, she was elected to the American Law Institute. And in 2007, the Hispanic Business Magazine celebrated her as one of the most influential Hispanics. As you can tell, Professor Hernández is a trailblazer. She is a member of a small cadre of legal academics specializing in comparative slavery, race relations, and anti-discrimination law in the Americas and the Caribbean. In fact, her work provided many scholar activists like myself a path, a muse, a light, and an opportunity to pursue this very unique line of scholarly inquiry and to employ this incisive lens to advance freedom, equity, and justice on behalf of African descendants throughout the diaspora. For over 20 years, I personally have found Professor Hernández's insights on civil rights law and policy illuminating and inspiring, and Smithsonian Magazine has agreed with me. In late 2022, Smithsonian Magazine hailed her most recent book as one of the year's must-reads. Professor Hernández's trilogy of books, which are listed in full in her bio on the program, and those who are online, you can also check it out online. Her trilogy of books generates new awareness and understanding about the breadth of African descendants throughout the Western Hemisphere, and in doing so, her brilliant and accessible analyses compel us to appreciate both the both the emancipatory and marginalizing role of law and policy affecting the lived conditions of African descendants throughout the Western Hemisphere since the eras of racial slavery, realities that are often underexamined, erased, and unknown. As a pioneering civil rights scholar advocate, it could be no more fitting, at least in my opinion, and I think everyone will share in this opinion, for us to hear from Professor Hernández's reflections on Juneteenth and its relationship to the contemporary state of freedom, racial justice, and economic justice for African descendants domestically and globally. As Kara has already mentioned, we've already had such a great treat, but you are still ready for another real treat.
Some more snacks.
That's exactly right, some more snacks, as Kara says. As Professor Hernández will be in conversation with Kara Jenkins, administrator of the Nevada Equal Rights Commission, whom I likewise have the privilege of calling a dear friend and comrade in the quest for equality, and with whom, as she's already mentioned, I had the pleasure of working with to free the hair in Nevada, advancing in 2021 Nevada's first version of the Creating a Respectful World for Natural Hair Act, or what is popularly known as the Crown Act, making Nevada the 12th state among 22 states to enact this historic piece of civil rights legislation sponsored by Nevada State Senators Dina Neal and Dallas Harris. And this particular piece of legislation, I think, is really fitting to talk about even in the context of Juneteenth, because it protects Nevadans' rights to be free from racial and national origin discrimination on the basis of their hair, natural hairstyles, protective hairstyles, and other observable characteristics. I am simply overjoyed to witness what will surely be an enriching and empowering conversation between two of this nation's truly transformative civil rights and civic leaders. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Professor Tanya Hernández, and back to the stage Administrator Kara Jenkins. You're welcome.
Mic on? Are our mics on?
Try it now.
Okay.
There we go. Folks in the Zoom chat have been writing in to say they can't always hear the speakers. And
Okay.
so maybe some adjustment needs to be made. I've just
Nyla,
been watching
Tina. I mean, we are in for a treat. Let me make sure I'm covering up the Spanx. Okay, we're good. Hey, everybody, thank you so much. This is awesome, and we are so happy to have you, Professor Hernández. And you know, we're getting to the good part now. I mean, like we had mentioned before, all the remarks were so thoughtful, and I really want to say, from a personal lens, as African American leaders and professionals, we all kind of have to walk in a space where we are straddling a lot of things and trying to make justice be known, but at the same time, I thought that was really, really great that General Ford said that, you know, trying to get people to follow and accept justice, but through representation, see that it can be done through people of color. And you have a breadth of knowledge and research, and I mean, everybody's read the program in your bio. It's just an honor to have you in this state. So welcome as the host state and city to Nevada. And so we're gonna get going with questions. I'm gonna try to do my best Oprah. I'm going to try. I watched the Oprah Michelle Obama interview for the Light We Carry. I'm going to try and do better, okay? I'm going to try and do better. And so, Professor Hernández, it just seems as if the stars have aligned to have you here with us today to celebrate Juneteenth this year, because we just passed legislation and the governor just signed legislation making it a state holiday. And you're so accomplished with ties to Nevada as well. But tell us, why you? Who is Tanya Hernández? What is your relationship to domestic matters of emancipation when your research is so heavily involved with other types of research and studies? So just help us understand, and the audience understand, about your comparative law analysis, your research, and how it relates to Juneteenth domestically today.
Happy to do it. First, I just want to say thank you for inviting me and having me here. As Kara said, you know, I have ties here. But first, so just professionally, because I come to UNLV quite often, not often enough, but when they invite me, I come. Or when they do a lot of their great conferences on labor law and employment, I show up. So I have that professional tie that I'm very happy to continue for many years now. Then I also have a very personal tie, family tie. My godbabies are here. And so, one official, the other. You can't take on one sibling and not take on the other. It's just not done.
Yeah.
So they both belong to me. And then, of course, their parents. So it's always a pleasure to come back to Las Vegas. Now, why me? Why am I here to talk about this? And it's because I want to be able to share with you sort of how passionate I am about thinking of Juneteenth as having an international resonance, not to deflect from the domestic, but to amplify the domestic. I saw a little noise in the chat, like, why is she here not talking about African Americans? I'm gonna talk about African Americans. Don't worry.
We have 20 minutes.
All right. But here's what I want to say. As I look at it, Juneteenth invites us to do two primary things, right? To celebrate and to contemplate, right? And to celebrate and to contemplate in all its complexity. Right? Celebrate the Jubilee, right? The freedom. And yet, 2 years after the freedom was supposed to have already happened, that's complicated, right? It's not a clean, absolute
Let me
Jubilee.
interject. You're right. We can't discuss liberation without first addressing the sins of the past, the sins of slavery. Want to walk us through that abolition movement to emancipation and then talk about hope for freedom?
Sure, I'll do it all. Katery's putting all this stuff on the table for me. Okay, let me start chewing. Yes, slavery, why the international and domestic? Just simply to say that, when Juneteenth becomes an official holiday, what it does is it enables us to think about commemorating the celebration of freedom without losing sight of its complicated position. Meaning, we're not celebrating the Emancipation Proclamation of 1861, right? We're celebrating the delayed delivery of the news. Right? That's complicated. Right?
Complicated.
That means it comes with a sense of a responsibility, right, to redress, right, in many different ways. Okay. Now, why think about this sort of amplified internationally? Well, what many people don't realize is that the story of slavery in the United States, we tend to think of that as like that's the story of slavery. And yet the story of slavery, when we think about it from a quantitative perspective, it's really much more of a Latin American Caribbean story. Two quick statistics. Right? Historians say that approximately 90% of the 10.7 million slaves forcibly brought to the Americas were brought to Latin America and the broader Caribbean, both English-speaking, Dutch-speaking, French-speaking, etc. Right? If we try to narrow that down to just Spanish-speaking, that becomes about 65 to 70%. Why do I zero in on those numbers? What we call the United States today only received 3.5%. Not even 5, 3.5% of that forcible slave trade. So what that sort of just suggests to you is like, yes, the United States is important, but at the same time, we've got lots of company. And this is company that also looks to the United States as far as a thought leader in thinking about these histories in their complicated space. And so this is why I think it's so important to think about how Juneteenth is important to us domestically, but also the sort of echoes that it has across, the rest of the globe and where other African descendants are located who are also in the midst of their own civil rights struggles.
Absolutely, and let's talk about this because I read your books, 2 of them, not the third. I'm waiting on the third, but mind blown, just mind blown. But in your research, and not even your law review journal articles, you just have a catalog of really well-researched data points that this is just not a domestic situation. This happened other places as well with similar impacts that we can have comparators for. And in your research, you discuss race, that complicated word. and the manipulation of characteristics when convenient to change them and include others to keep some people still back from achieving equity post-slavery by dominant cultures. You talk about that, and you also say that post-slavery segregation, we're still not yet free. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that domestically. Let's talk about what happened after the slaves were emancipated, and then in 1865 when the last group of formerly enslaved Africans were notified that they were in fact had been free for 2 years. And then let's take it through Jim Crow, just for an example, or elaborate. And we can talk about Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education, or even Virginia versus Loving, where you were not allowed to date who you loved based on race, and any similarities there with your research.
Well, in this whirlwind tour through history, the one takeaway I want to leave you with, right, is that for every moment of celebration, the reality is that it's complicated, right? And that with every moment of celebration or a milestone, there's also folks who were not too happy about the advancement, and so there's a pushback. Right? We constantly have these cycles. And this is why I think Juneteenth is so important, right? Because Juneteenth, in some respects, has us sit in that uncomfortable space, right? For the reasons I just articulated. So, we don't celebrate, the Emancipation Proclamation of 1861 in of itself, because that would be too symbolic, right? That would be as to say, oh, slavery finished, over, Abraham Lincoln said so, let's keep moving. Right? Yeah. Instead, Juneteenth means that we look to the way in which there's been pushback. What kind of pushback? Okay. We're marching through the history of time, right? 1865, the Civil War ends. Right? 1866 is actually the first national Civil Rights Act. We tend to think of 1964. But 1866 was the first. It was meant to enforce the 13th Amendment, right? Abolition, constitutionally, of slavery. Andrew Jackson, right, says no to that. Right? Well, I should say, Andrew Johnson, right? With my speeding through history, I'm like, putting too much on the table. But what I mean to say by that is this, all right? If we only celebrated just the symbolic, we would lose sight of the pushback. Right? Continuing to march forward, what do we have? We have the 14th Amendment. You would think, oh, that would take care of everything. That's the Equality Amendment, 1868. But no. What we have there is the full-blown raging of what we'll call black codes, right? To put the formerly enslaved back into a position of servitude. How? Primarily through vagrancy laws. Oh, you're walking down the street. We suspect you're not, too idle. Let's arrest you. Now the way in which we punish you after we have arrested you is to put you into involuntary labor. You must now, we contract you away. Right? That was a huge way of putting the formerly enslaved, now emancipated, back into positions of servitude. You can sort of think almost like loitering statutes today, sort of have that kind of echo. What are you doing just hanging around here? Right? As if freedom doesn't mean you can have mobility to stand wherever you want to breathe air or smoke a cigarette or what have you. Okay, maybe smoking cigarettes not such a good example, but but in any case, think 1972, and then it would make more sense, the smoking example. And along with that comes, right, bars to interracial marriage, bars to ownership of property, purchase of property, bars to mobility through public transport. Right? When we think about a Homer Plessy in Louisiana, right, that's a way to limit his socioeconomic status by enabling him to be able to move through space in a dignified manner, right? Not in the black-only car, right, et cetera. So these are all ways in which, like, if we only looked at the Civil War end as a moment in time, if we only looked at the Emancipation Proclamation as an 1861 moment of time, we would be blind, right, to the actual complexity of our history. Right? There's much to celebrate, but there's also a lot there to unpack that has continuing legacies today.
And what has your research shown comparatively in other countries? Similar Black codes?
Well, what is interesting is that in other countries, right, I'll talk from Latin America in particular, right, there is a strategic comparison to the United States, so as to say, yeah, we also had slavery, yeah, we had a lot of it, the 90% number, don't forget. But we're not like the United States because we didn't have Jim Crow segregation. We didn't have black codes. Right? Now, the problem with that, and that's an earlier book, right, is that what that loses sight of is that you don't have to legislate these things. You don't have to do a black code if your customs already handle it for you. Meaning, you don't have to go to a legislature to make something law if it's already being enforced by the police. If the state government is already putting resources to it. This is a shorthand way of me saying, yes, there was Jim Crow in Latin America. It was just done through the force of customary law. Right? And resources, right, and investment on part of the state was done to keep a racial hierarchy in place. So some of the particulars are different, you know, when you look across geographic spaces, but what I think is so invaluable about doing the comparative work is that it helps you see that some things that are viewed in isolation become much more easy to understand when you see them in comparison.
Give us some examples.
Well, what I mean by this is like for instance, sometimes you hear in the United States, well, actually, after each decennial census, right, the Census Bureau puts out the numbers, and typically the headline is, "We are more multiracial than ever." Right? This is just so, we got people from everywhere. It's just so wonderful. I'm not disputing that that's not wonderful, but what the conversations then tend to be is like, and we won't have any more of this racism because we'll all be from so many different places that, you know, we won't have that race problem anymore. Right? If you only think about that in the isolated context of the United States, right, you might be persuaded to think that that makes sense. Like, well, yeah, I guess, you know, we've been so in a black-white binary. Now that there's all these other people here from all these other different places, yeah, and that now we're interracial marriage. You know, we're all going to be happy and together and harmonious. You might think that there's a logic to that. However, when you do things in comparative perspective and analysis, what you see is that story, we've been told that story in Latin America much longer than y'all. Right? And in Latin America, that story has not lifted up black people. Right? Yeah, we got lots of mixture. Yeah, we got people from all lots of different places or what have you, but that has not changed the racial hierarchy. You know what changes the racial hierarchy? Hard work.
Okay.
Right? And my short takeaway by that is that demography alone does not give you social justice. What gives you social justice is people, good intentioned people, putting the hard work into social movements and activisms and legislation, right, to make things happen, not just simply because of having different people in a room. That doesn't do the work.
And talking about it and having conversations like this, and it's just so amazing because you have the intersectionality, Professor Hernández, of being Latina and African. You're not American, African-American, Afro-Latina. What is your preference?
I don't get too caught up on the labels.
Yeah,
but,
that's
you know,
an American thing here too.
Right.
Yeah, what is your preference?
I mean, or I should say, or it's the terminology. The terminology,
Yeah.
like, you know, like I'm old, so I use Latino. But you know,
Okay.
I don't mind when young people say to me, "No, but I want the X or I want the E." That's fine with me too. But you know, this old mouth says "oh." But in any case, the bottom line is I'm American.
There we go.
that is to say, born in the United States, etc. I am an Afro-Latina in the sense that I'm from descendants of slaves, but from Latin America, you know, Puerto Rico to be specific. Right?
Oh, that's
So
amazing. Okay.
the slave trade comes to my family. I have a great-great-grand who, you know, there's stories about what his life was like in slavery, but not in the South of the United States, but in South America.
Because we just learned from you that 90% of it wasn't just the United States, it was in the Latin Americas, where I believe my ancestors, they came from through Louisiana, but might have been Haiti or West Africa. So, but yes, we're American, understand. So where do you think we have to go in this conversation? What is our call or charge to action that you think, not only is it just not saying, okay, we're complicit in it because we're all racially mixed and everything seems cool, and I like you and you like me, so racism's gone. What is the call to action? Because you hinted at it just a moment ago, Professor Hernández, that it's not just being complacent, it's very intentional work, activism, research, reading, people attending chats like this and chiming in, and we want those questions to come through, guys. But what would you say would be maybe your top 3 or 4 calls to action?
Top 3. Well, I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. The thing that's been most on my mind are some of the conversations that I've been hearing as to the idea of sort of similar to this, the census shows that we're more diverse than ever, so let's stop working, on issues of race and racism because, we're all diverse, so that's the end of the story. A parallel or a corollary to that is the idea where, there are more and more people from other places, again, Latin America, and they don't have that black-white binary. So we should stop talking about that. And in fact, that, people from Latin America, they don't understand us here and our race problem because they don't have those race problems. Now, here's where not becoming racially literate, I guess that's the top of my agenda, not becoming racially literate across geography does us all a disservice as far as the Freedom Project is concerned, right? The continuing project for freedom and liberation. And it's in the following way, right? So this is what the recent book is about, The Racial Innocence, Unmasking Latino, Anti-Black Bias, and the Struggle for Equality. You can't leave it to a law professor not to have a long title.
Plug it, plug it.
It's a long time. Okay, I try a short one, I never get to be short. Okay, so what I try to unpack there, and it's part of this project here about saying a global anti-blackness racial literacy that is so important, is that here in the United States, Latinos can often be viewed as, they're their own thing, they're not white, they're not black, okay. But this whole so-called idea that there's no more black-white binary overlooks that we have black-white binary within Latino communities. That meaning, we come black, we come white, we come indigenous, we come Asian, we come mixed too, but so do a lot of other people, right? It's not unique, right? And that within that racial diversity of the pan-ethnic group, there are unfortunately problematic racial attitudes. Right? And so within education, housing, public accommodations, right? All the places that anti-discrimination law speaks, right? There are unfortunately Latinos who have discretion, right, who are part of the problem of racism. That is to say, they exercise anti-black bias against Afro-Latinos, African-Americans, people of African descent, more globally, Africans, West Indians, et cetera. Right? And why is this so important? Why, or is it, why are you just talking about your stuff? Isn't that kind of niche? No, this is why I think it's so important for all of us to understand. Within case law, right, when people come to say that they've been discriminated against, when the judges or the juries, right, are racially illiterate, right, and don't have this understanding about all the different ways in which the legacy of slavery is very global, right, they think that the Latino subject has an immediate defense to racial discrimination.
What do you mean?
I call it a pseudo-defense, meaning it's the, I can't be racist, I'm Latino, defense to racism. As if the demography alone, right, just the ethnic identity could be its own defense to racism, as opposed to just apply the law and make an inquiry, do the investigation, ask for the evidence. But no, unfortunately, what I track in the book are the ways in which this racial literacy just gives Latinos a pass. We don't have to ask any more questions. You're Latino, go straight to, pass go, et cetera, collect your money on the Monopoly board. And so when I'm thinking about sort of like, how do we think about Juneteenth, right, and all its complexity, I think part of it should also be sort of like as a call to action, right, is to increase our global racial literacy, right? Because there's many more of us that we need to really band together, right? And not have sort of distracting storytelling. Oh, don't worry about racism anymore, we're all diverse kind of storytelling, distract us from the real project of liberation.
Isn't it true, Professor Hernández, and we say this all the time as African Americans, we're not a monolith. I can respectfully disagree from Justice Clarence Thomas on a number of things. We are not a monolith, and that's safe to say for all cultures, correct?
Well, here's the thing that I always find so interesting is that often when people say, oh, well, you can't just talk about Black people in one way, blah, 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 blah. It's as if there is this inability to understand that Blackness also comes with ethnicity.
Yes.
Right? That Blackness also comes with different language, right? Comes with different cultural ways, right? So meaning to be Black in Opelousas, Louisiana.
Are you my cousin?
Can feel culturally somewhat different, right? From someone who is Black in Syracuse, New York. It's very cold there, people, very, very cold. Right? So that does not take away from the relevance, the salience, the importance of recognizing the commonality of Blackness, right? And the importance of the way in which we are all bound together, right? And need to have to understand that those ties that bind in our joint paths towards freedom. But I guess to speak to your point, like this idea about not describing us as a monolith, well, that's because it's almost this way of exceptionalizing and reducing us differently from any other group, right? You wouldn't, well, I don't think I need to go any further than that, but there's so many other groups.
Go there.
Where,
We're okay. We got a little bit of time.
you will look at people from, let's say, here's a perfect example. I was just there recently because I had a little work gig in Italy. Right? You don't know the complexity of ethnic identity till you spend some time with Italians talking in Italian, where they will be like, oh, no. The Sicilian is not like the Milanese. That's not like the Genovese. It's a little country like this. They got different ways of speaking Italian. Their dialects. Someone from Venice does not understand somebody from Naples. It's a thing. And so within that context, they're very clear. Like, yes, we're all Italian, but we were formerly, different city-states, and so we have very different identities. And that doesn't take away from them being Italian.
Exactly, and just as women too. We're all women, but we all come from different ideas and thoughts. So just being a woman is complex enough. I think that's a really good point to make to everybody who's watching today, that we are all very complex. We're bounded by, at least for African Americans or Afro-Latinos, I said O's, by our Blackness, but we also have very different experiences in being in this world and fully present and how we're treated. And so when we look at race, we look at it as a very complex anomaly, because whether or not your race is accepted basically gets you better treatment in some circles or some opportunities, or access to housing or certain employment opportunities or pay benefits, or enjoying equal spaces. And so I think I want to just really echo and say this has been a treat having you, but I'm going to let you close out with any final remarks and take questions from the audience, because I think there are questions. But any final remarks?
Well, my final remark is, let's not let this just be another day to go out and get a sale on sheets or what have you.
Oh, Monday.
Yeah, right. Let's not have Juneteenth, devolve into just that. That we sleep in and we, catch a sale here or there at that Target or any other place that you like to shop. The holiday is really meant for us to celebrate, and here's where I want to close this out with, right? Is the the greater road to completion of our revolution, right? Meaning, you can't celebrate July 4th as a complete freedom when July 4th did not have June 19th together with it, right? Meaning, to think about really celebrating a democracy, a multiracial democracy, going to the July 4th barbecue, right? It's only half the game, right? The other half has to be putting June 19th on the table. When you put those two things together, it actually brings us much closer to really being able to do the fireworks in the sky, right? And to have some more celebrating. I mean, we got more work to do, but it brings us closer. And so I guess that's sort of one of the things I'd like to have as a takeaway, to think about the way in which, and this is not, an idea that's original to me. It actually comes from Frederick Douglass, right? This idea of thinking about a democracy being incomplete until you put the picture of Black freedom onto the page as well.
You are helping do that. Thank you so much. We loved having you, but yes, we can applause. We can definitely applause. But we're going to take some questions now from the audience. Do we have anyone that wants to just stand up and ask a question? And I will repeat it. And then we'll also take some from the online. So Tina, you can pick those questions and bring them to us, please. Any questions in the audience? Oh, yes? So the question was, with the affirmative action bills and legislation now, how will that affect Black and brown kids?
So, it's any day now, we're going to hear the decision of the Supreme Court in a case of assessing the constitutionality of the affirmative action program at Harvard University. Harvard, right? And
I kind of went there too.
Ooh, okay. And here's the thing. We don't know what they're going to say. The tea leaves from prior rhetoric from the Supreme Court suggests that they're going to say it's unconstitutional. Right? But we don't know that. They may just gut it and say it's constitutional, but take away any ability to actually do a halfway effective program. But here's how I want to respond. Right? Just like any other setback, vagrancy laws, anti-miscegenation statutes, bars to contracting, right? We've been through some dark times before, our ancestors, and we have managed to keep moving forward. And I think that California may be a useful place for us to look at if the decision says that affirmative action in federally funded educational institutions is unconstitutional in some way or form, right? Why? Because California has had it banned by state edict for many years now. And they had to regroup and figure out how could they be inclusive and responsive as educational institutions to include the full spectrum of their young people, right? To be responsive to their responsibilities as institutions of education to have the doors open, right, to many. Right? And so I think we're all going to have to look much more closely at how California has managed to navigate that, given the bans that they experienced much earlier than the rest of us will have across the nation. I'm not saying that that's going to be easy, or that there's not going to be some outfall, right? Meaning, here's one thing that people don't often talk about. I have always had this view that programs of affirmative action are particularly helpful in thinking about issues of implicit bias. Now that makes, what are you talking about? What are you putting?
Can you define implicit bias real quick, Professor?
Certainly. Psychologists, social psychologists, right, use this language, implicit bias, but for regular folks, I'm not a psychologist either, you might call it unconscious bias, right? This is the way in which even when we are not sort of intentionally thinking about, I don't like this kind of person, or I don't like that kind of person because of their background, that our cultural training, all the information we take in, all the social messaging that we take in, that informs our intuitive responses, right? So who do we think looks dangerous in a dark alley? You know, who do we clutch our purse a little tightly more to our shoulder if we think that they look dangerous? Not with no information, right? That's not based on actual intellectual analysis. You don't have any information. That's based on an intuitive response informed by all your cultural training from our society, the news, the books you've read, the TV shows you've seen. All of us, right, have some form of implicit bias. And so when admissions officers, right, at universities are going through files, they're human beings. And when they read these files, they bring themselves to it. Right? How could you take yourself out of how you're reading something? You may say, okay, Hernández, be neutral, be neutral, be neutral. But I'm still me. Right? So when I'm reading a file, right, if I'm going with no other guidance, I'm using my own intuitions, right, about who I think is excellent. Right? And who I think is excellent may be shaped by all the very same standards that I have been told over and over again. Somebody who played lacrosse, somebody who, was excellent on the debate team, meaning lots of things that don't correlate necessarily with intellect or intellectual promise, but correlate with your socioeconomic status. You know, who gets to be able to purchase those lacrosse sticks? I see a lot of blank faces. Y'all don't even know I'm talking about lacrosse, right? This is a very Northeast elitist sport and probably a reference, but it's another way of saying it's a cultural view, right, that really has nothing to do with how smart you are. It just has to do with a proxy for what you think looks smart. What affirmative action enables, that is so important, is to say to an admissions officer, you need to think more broadly. You need to think about being inclusive. You need to look at the full spectrum of the students to see, or at the applicants, all that they could possibly bring, and respect all their prior achievements based on the context that they found themselves in. Right?
And not let them being from Compton rather than Cambridge be a deterrent in giving them a glance.
The short way of saying this is what affirmative action enables, and let's hope it doesn't entirely go away, but if it does, we'll figure out something, right? Is that it says race matters, so stop working on your intuitions and instead put that immediately in front of your eyes to consider. Because the social psychologists say that implicit bias, right, this unconscious bias, is not the end of the world, but the only way to actually intervene, to disrupt it, to not have you making decisions with no actual information, is to acknowledge it. When you try to say, oh, I'm just not gonna be racist, that doesn't really do anything, right? When you say, oh, it's possible I might be operating on some of my implicit biases, let me ask more questions. Let me slow down. Let me not make just some judge reactions, right? Rushed reactions. This is what an affirmative action program can enable. These are my own musings about this stuff, right? And so, you know, it will be a loss, right, not to have that. But I guess I'm too much of a scholar activist to think, okay, well, let's just go home and cry. No, you know, my ancestors didn't survive all they survived for me to go home and cry because some Supreme Court justice said, no, you can't use the affirmative action program. We go back to work. We figure something out.
Go back to work and figure something out. That's amazing. Excellent question and excellent answer. Any other questions in the audience? We have a question. Yes, ma'am? Oh, hi, Nika. Hi.
She's going to repeat the question.
So just repeating the question for everybody online, it's talk about the history that's unknown. Why has it been unknown? Thank you so much, Nevada Independent.
Well, part of the problem with the national illiteracy, racial illiteracy, right? And notice, I don't say people are ignorant. I'm saying they're illiterate. And you want to follow that up and clarify something for me? Yes, I'm talking about and I'm agreeing with you there, right? Right? Why are we racially illiterate? Because it hasn't been part of our curriculums other than a touch that, keep going method of education, right? I mean, instructors feel uncomfortable about it. They have textbooks that are printed in Texas. And for the most part, right, those are the textbooks that we have. And Texans don't like to talk about slavery. And ironic, right, that Juneteenth is coming out of Galveston. But in any case, I think you need another event for us to really unpack all of that and deconstruct it. But so what that means is, if you have textbooks that have been sort of censored, whitewashed, right, so that there's not the information there for young people to immediately have access to. If you have instructors who haven't been given the training, meaning it's not just like, oh my goodness, they're terrible people. No, they're not terrible people. They're trying to do the best they can with what they've got, right? And so if we have instructors who haven't been given proper materials, who haven't been given the adequate training, that then leaves them to say, let me just teach in the space that I am comfortable and feel competent in. And that leads to a national form of illiteracy about the details of slavery, its global aspects, right, and its continuing legacy, as opposed to this thing that once upon a time there was, then Abraham Lincoln, then it was over. Approach.
Yes.
To do
And you're
issue.
so right. It's about being uncomfortable as well. Talking about slavery is hard. Understanding the sins of slavery is hard. But we don't heal what we don't reveal. And so I think we've got some online questions. Tina, you want to go ahead and read those for Professor Hernández?
Absolutely. We do have one question that says, would an originalist view of Section 5 of the 14th Amendment provide a more power for the government to make society more equal?
And maybe for some of us who don't know Section 5 of that code, you can spell it
Well,
out for us.
I mean, here's what I would say about, I think the heart of the question, right? The heart of the question is originalist, right? What does an originalist perspective means, right? An originalist perspective, which some of our Supreme Court justices purport to hold, because I think there's a little bit of hypocrisy about when and if they decide to be originalists on any given case. But what does that mean? Originalist means that they only want to look at the words of the Constitution as it was written on the day the ink was dry. I mean, they only want to look at it, right?
Strict interpretation of just what it was.
As if, meaning you could look and say, okay, this is what the framers wanted.
Not contextually, but just strict.
You don't look at it as a living document. You don't look at it as having a sense of being adapted and having to be understood within the moment in which it is being applied. Originalists, right, what they purport to be doing is to say, no, we view this as sacred, the document, right? And so we only apply it in the strictest way, in the most limited way. We don't extend it out, right? So if it's not in the document, we don't infer it in there. I'll give you an example of what would be an originalist kind of perspective. Let me take it completely out of the politics of constitutional law for a second to give you an example. In the world that you operate in, Kara, right, in employment discrimination, there's another highlight, right? The 1964 Civil Rights Act, right, that says no more of this nonsense, right? I'm not looking at an employee as a full employee and instead looking at them as having deficiencies because of their racial background, right? And gender, right? Gender's in there. An originalist kind of approach, if one wanted to take that to the statute, to 1964, would say, okay, it says that you cannot discriminate based on somebody's sex, their gender. Right? If the originalist perspective had taken hold, we wouldn't be able to have sexual harassment now be inferred and understood as part of what is sex discrimination. There is nothing in Title VII that says sexual harassment is against the law.
Or orientation.
Orientation, right? Sexual harassment only gets to be part of what we understand to be Title VII because feminists went before judges and said, no, this is a living document, and you can't understand sex discrimination without also addressing how the harassment that we experience in the workplace when a supervisor treats us not as a worker, but as a sexual object. When we're asked to do things that have nothing to do with the job description in order to keep our jobs, right, that too is sex discrimination. It's not somebody who's awkward asking for a date. That's making my life a living hell and putting my job at risk. It's altering the conditions of my workplace that a lot of the guys don't have to experience. Right? An originalist perspective would say, sexual harassment is not written into the statute, so you don't get to talk about that. So I would not be of the view that an originalist approach is ever going to be more emancipatory. That's just my own personal view on this, since I take it that was the question. My personal view, right, is that whenever you don't look at a piece of law making, whether it be statutory, constitutional, et cetera, as a living document, but applying to the human beings living right here in this moment with the current struggles that we have, then you are not doing justice. Right? And that law has to be about doing justice as well. And you can't get a fuller understanding and enforcement of equality, right, if you are only thinking about how would Benjamin Franklin think about this, as opposed to what does it mean to be a worker in the world right now.
With roads and no horses and actually cars. Yeah, that part. Any questions online or in the audience? Yes, sir. Please stand up.
Thank you. Hello, my name is John Cook. I'm a current junior at Harvard College. Oh, no shit. Previous discussion. And it really hits home to me because I am a student who works within the Black Students Association, one of the people mentioned in the lawsuit directly. And we do a lot of work to increase the standing of Black students at Harvard College, at Yale, at all of the Ivy League. And it really hits home to me because I'm from this community. I live about 10 miles north of where we are right now. I went to Rancho High School and graduated 2 years ago.
All right.
And so all of the racial groups at Harvard, not even Black students, even Asian students, even students from Europe, every group at Harvard that has a group representing them stands for affirmative action, stands for being a place that's racially diverse. So it's a lot of work that we do at Harvard to make that a reality. And seeing this case, it's stressful for a lot of us. You know, like we wake up every day, refresh Twitter, see if the decision dropped. But
See, Benjamin Franklin didn't have Twitter. See?
That's right. That's right. Originalist, talk to that Twitter.
just general comment on that. Like we're gonna do our thing regardless, and that's a point that I really like to get out there. That affirmative action exists. It helped a lot of us get into those spaces, but in those schools, in those institutions, we're doing our thing. We're making our mark, and we're going to continue. But that's kind of just an aside, unrelated to the question I have for both of you. As graduates from law schools, and I'm interested in the law profession as well. And it's a profession that is obviously racially lopsided in the United States. And I wanted to ask you both, what's some of the work being done to make things such as the LSAT, the bar exam, more inclusive to people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who may not be able to afford some of the resources that are required to do well and be competitive in those higher schools? And if that work isn't being done, what things do you think should be done in order to make that work?
Beautiful. I'm just going to repeat the question, and it was to both of us, but I'm going to really focus on you having the answer because this is about you. But what are we doing as women lawyers to try to make it more inclusive for young African Americans to see that space and to realize that dream? And just based on my own experience. First of all, you're from Rancho, you're from Vegas. Congratulations, young man. You just look sharp in your suit. We're so happy that you're here. We're proud of you. Harvard is an amazing school, and I'm 1,000% it's because you earned it. And so thank you for your contributions in being here. Personally, I will have to say that it's a collective. Professor Green was the one who was like, don't give up. You have to find your tribe. And so when she was at Tulane and I was at Loyola, I'm wondering, what did I decide? What did I do? Why did I do this? She was just like, no, it's okay, you've got this, because I was the first in my family too. And then it's always been my passion after graduation to make sure that other folks had an opportunity to encourage people to go to law school, to have interns from the Boyd Law School come and work at the Equal Rights Commission and even support staff to go. And that will forever be my mission, because if you have a good idea and if you want to make a change, it's accessible to you. The law is, I believe, a living document, and we need to make space for everybody to be represented in the law so that laws can work for you. And so that's kind of my contribution. I've even paid for some LSATs before, but it's easy money. It's, you see folks who need something and they want to do something, you support our youth, you give back to our kids, because we're going to leave this earth. It's what we leave behind. So Professor Hernández, do you want to say anything and add to that?
Well, I mean, I think what is interesting to think about are two movements that have been happening that affects this issue about having greater inclusivity, racial inclusivity within the legal profession, right, and access to law school. One is the growing movement amongst law schools to withdraw themselves from the U.S. News and World Report ranking systems. Right? Yale was one of the first ones, I think, to make their announcement, but then other schools have followed suit. Fordham, where I teach, is also part of that. And you would think, what does this have to do with diversifying the profession? Here's the thing, there's like this ripple effect, right? U.S. News and World Report is a magazine. What do they got to do with anything? But they're a magazine that makes money off sending out their little rankings on an annual basis. Best place to go to college, best state schools, best, the best. It's like a BuzzFeed quiz, right? They got plenty of these best things. And one of the best things is law schools. And the problem, though, is that they do it by taking a bunch of data, crunching some numbers, and they come up with a ranking system. And part of their beauty contest is to use the number of what's the LSAT score, what's the GPA score, averages of your entering class, right? So if you have a school that wanted to be as civically responsible as possible, meaning we don't just teach the people who already can teach themselves, but that you teach a broad array of students who didn't necessarily have either the highest GPAs or the highest LSA, the standardized test scores that are entrance examinations to law schools, right? That you want to look for talent in its fullest array, right? By the things that they say in the essays over their entrance, what their letters of recommendation are, what their prior history was before walking, what their activities were. I mean, the full spectrum of what they represent. The U.S. News and World Report ranking would dissuade you. Why? Because the more you try to be responsible as an educational institution, the lower those numbers go. The lower those numbers go, the lower you do in the beauty contest. Right? The lower you do in the beauty contest, then the more the students read that, and the harder it is for you then to get students to come pay your tuition, to pay the bills, to do so it's like this vicious cycle, which we have been caught up in for quite some time. And that vicious cycle makes it harder to be responsible to the profession, to have an inclusive law school class that then helps feed an inclusive legal profession. This movement of moving away from the U.S. News and World Report, not giving them information to put in their little, statistical churning that they do, I think can have a possibility. It's interesting to think about removing defanging their power, like getting rid of Voldemort, might be a way, right, to have law schools go back to doing what they should have been doing all along, just trying to educate the best people in their community and to give as much opportunity as possible so you have this full spectrum of wonderful people to be your lawyers and to go out into communities everywhere. And then the other thing that I have been finding very interesting And this, I'm curious about, and I'm watching myself, right? This idea of test optional. Yeah, during the pandemic, we had some of this freezing of like, you'd have to report scores and that kind of thing. And the world didn't come to an end. Now, the reason why I'm not like, oh, yes, this is the answer to the thing. I don't know if it's the answer to things, right? Because sometimes you can have unintended consequences from something that might be well-intentioned, right? Getting rid of standardized testing. It's true that standardized testing does not show the full spectrum of what you have as a talent, right? Some people actually don't do very well on it. Not because of their intellect, but just because like they freeze up on the exam, or they don't think that way. They think in other brilliant ways, but ways that don't get measured very nicely by the little, fill in the little circle with your number 2 pencil kind of an exam, right? I guess I'm dating myself. Now much of that is all on the computer now, isn't it?
No, we had blue books. We had blue books in law school. Did you have a blue book?
Anyway, I'm not going to talk to that right now. And so, there's that, right? But at the same time, these unintended adverse consequences is, if you don't have the test, which enables anyone, anywhere, right, to show you who they are without you having any kind of implicit biases about them, right? Does that mean that there will be some more weight given to other things in the absence of the test that actually create hierarchy as well? I don't, I'm trying to think it through and I'm watching it myself, but I think that's another aspect to the issue of what kind of effects will this have on the legal profession.
And other countries do it where you just intern after law school. You just become a barrister and you just train under someone.
Yeah, but that means you have to have access to benefactors. And I guess, to kind of come full circle, with so much of our conversation, is that the real message, I think, is that true inclusion really, it means being aware, right, that there are challenges to it, and being willing to do the work.
Do the work.
Right? No system is perfect, right? And so that means that you have to not rely on any particular system, but to always be asking of those various systems, of those various policies, are they doing equity? Are they being inclusive? That, I think, is probably an approach that might be more salutary.
Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Tanya K. Hernández.
Alrighty, wow, thank you so much. Let's give another round of applause for this incredible conversation between Professor Hernández and Kara Jenkins. Oh, thank you so very much. So we will move next to a few more incredible remarks through video. Deborah Enix Ross, who is the president of the American Bar Association, followed by Mary L. Smith, who is the president-elect of the American Bar Association.
Hello, I'm Deborah Enix Ross, president of the American Bar Association. The roots of Juneteenth may literally be in Texas, but its story resonates throughout America. In Virginia Beach, Virginia, the Southampton Roads Bar Association was founded in 1923 as reportedly the first bar association by and for African-American lawyers. At that time, the ABA didn't welcome Black lawyers. In 1912, the association we now proudly call our home essentially restricted membership to white lawyers when it rescinded the membership of William H. Lewis, the first Black Assistant U.S. Attorney General. Another lawyer subsequently denied ABA membership was Gertrude Durden Rush, the first African-American woman to be called to the Iowa bar. Denied membership in the ABA, she helped found the National Bar Association in Des Moines. 31 years after the ABA denied membership to William H. Lewis, in 1943, the ABA passed a resolution stating that ABA membership is not, quote, not dependent on race, creed, or color. It was not until 1950, 7 years later, when a Black lawyer would be admitted to membership in the ABA. The stains of slavery and racism still haunt us. The ABA and bar associations throughout the country are leading advocates for equal justice under law, equity in our justice system, and a legal profession that is open to all. Together, we will do the work that's necessary to end mass incarceration, economic disparity, discriminatory housing policies, and a justice system that systemically treats people unequally. As lawyers, let us remind ourselves on Juneteenth that it is our sacred duty, always and in everything we do, to protect and preserve our freedoms and fight for those who are not yet free.
Hi, I'm Mary Smith, President-elect of the American Bar Association, and we are here to honor and celebrate Juneteenth. Frederick Douglass once famously asked, "What to a slave is the 4th of July?" To honor the anniversary of Juneteenth and the freedom granted to enslaved African Americans, we can ask a similar question. What is the significance of Juneteenth to the Black community? Or more appropriately, what is the significance of Juneteenth to all of us? This year, let's remember Juneteenth is the holiday that doesn't mark a document, a battle, a birthday, or a national tragedy, but the fundamental promise of America being more completely realized, the day on which Thomas Jefferson's rousing rhetoric finally rang true throughout America, for all Americans. As Barack Obama said, Juneteenth has never been a celebration of victory or an acceptance of the way things are. It's a celebration of progress. It's an affirmation that despite the most painful parts of our history, change is possible, and there is still so much work to do. The event today is being celebrated in Nevada, and you may ask, I thought that Juneteenth is all about Texas. However, Juneteenth is about the promise of our democracy and our freedom. Therefore, every community across America has a connection to Juneteenth. Nevada has come a long way in advancing our freedoms and our democracy. When Louis Armstrong, Nat King Cole, and Ella Fitzgerald headlined on the Las Vegas Strip, they slipped through stage doors or kitchen doors and left the same way after taking their bows. They were unable to rent rooms at white-only hotels. They retreated to boarding houses on the west side of Las Vegas. Famous or not, they couldn't try on clothes at white-owned stores. If you tried something on, they made you buy it, one Las Vegas resident recalls. Another local tells of the day Sammy Davis Jr. took a dip in a whites-only swimming pool at the New Frontier. Afterward, the manager drained the pool. Sammy Davis Jr. then recalled, "Being a star has made it possible for me to get insulted in place where other Negroes hope to go and get insulted." So today, let's hear from our esteemed panelists about the progress that has been made in Las Vegas and across the country, and more importantly, the work that is left to do. Thank you.
Okay, well, let me do this again. Our program is coming to a close, but we do hope that the conversation will continue. In our closing remarks, I would like to again thank Professor Tanya Hernández and the NERC administrator, Jenkins, for an empowering and educational conversation. Yes. We can do another hand clap there. And also would like to, again, thank our leadership within the Nevada community, the American Bar Association, and the legal profession for their support and their powerful remarks on this Juneteenth celebration. On behalf of the African American Affairs Committee of the ABA section on Civil Rights and Social Justice, my committee co-chair, Pamela Herndon, who is unfortunately unable to be with us today in person, but is streaming live from New Mexico. On behalf of both of us, we would really like to express our deep gratitude to all who have contributed their time, their talents, and their treasure to make this historic Juneteenth commemoration possible. We also express our sincere appreciation to all attendees, virtually and live in Las Vegas. It truly takes a village to implement a vision. Indeed, it was our collective vision to deliver an empowering, enriching, community-centered educational program that would first celebrate the countless contributions of African descendants to our society. Secondly, contemplate the psychological, spiritual, physical, and material meaning of freedom, as well as the contemporary realities of unfreedom. And thirdly, we really inspired or wanted to inspire more commitments, maybe possibly to re-inspire a commitment within all of us to do the daily work of dismantling barriers to full liberation, racial equality, and economic justice for not only African descendants in this country, but also around the world. Professor Hernández's brilliant legal scholarship highlights the interconnectedness of the diverse experiences of African descendants, and that since eras of racial slavery and apartheid, the ongoing quest for freedom, justice, and equality is a shared journey throughout the African diaspora. Moreover, what remains constant is that there are myriad and even yet unknown pathways to fulfill this quest. In this vein, we are issuing a specific charge to all in this room and virtually to support entrepreneurs and artists of African descent during this Juneteenth holiday and beyond Juneteenth. In doing so, we encourage you to purchase, read, and share the poignant publications and scholarship of our keynote speaker, Professor Hernández, alongside supporting other academics, artists, and entrepreneurs of African descent who are advancing liberation, belonging, racial equity, and economic justice in the U.S. and abroad. Intentionally supporting entrepreneurship as well as the giftedness and talents of artists and scholars like our youth from Broadway in the Hood and Lisi, who we saw today, is absolutely vital to our fuller enjoyment and exercise of freedom and agency with which we are naturally endowed, yet have not always been recognized or protected within law and society. We thank you all for taking the time out of your day to commemorate Juneteenth with us. We thank Administrator Jenkins, her team, and the Nevada Equal Rights Commission, the Whitney Library, and Las Vegas for creating such a welcoming space for this reflection on Juneteenth, freedom, racial, and economic justice for African descendants. As you leave this place, may you be well, and may you be inspired to seek greater knowledge, awareness, introspection, and action in furtherance of our program theme so that we and future generations can be free, mind, body, and spirit. Thank you. Okay. And those in the building, you can also see Professor Hernández outside during a meet and greet. I think they're setting up now, so thank you again for coming.